Hey, listeners. My name is Elisha, the founder of the Witnesses podcast. It's so beautiful to have you listening to our podcast. And I want you to know something that means a whole lot to me. Thank you for tuning in. And one thing I love to tell all of our listeners is it's not just about you listening, but listening to understand. Understanding is the most important thing. So important. So, you have to listen, learn, and practice. Thank you so very much and happy listening.
Hey Ben, it's so nice to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Elisha?
Doing fine as well. Okay, oftentimes I love to talk about the essence of this show, which is to invite amazing guests, amazing guests like Ben to come talk to us about the triumphant stories. Because we believe that in our audience, there might be someone who is stuck up in a situation that Ben came out of triumphantly. So by that person listening to you speak, Ben, he or she might actually pick an information from your words, from the things that you say. He or she might actually pick an information that will lead to their transformation. So the show is basically to cause transformation. You get it? So Ben, within the next few minutes,
Mhm.
let us get started with your story, the challenges that you faced, and how you overcame them. Then afterwards, I've got some really beautiful questions for you. Okay, over to you, Ben.
For me, it was challenging growing up because I was living in a part of the country that is a little more backwards. Hopefully, I won't offend anyone by saying that, but it was a part of the South, the Southeast Texas, and it was. I didn't resonate or relate to the culture, and for some reason, I was just drawn to indigenous peoples, primarily at that time Native Americans. And so, even from the time I was in my teens, maybe 14, 15, I started saving up money and making plans to make my way out of there. And so, by 17, I was on my own. I headed, intending to go as far as the Navajo reservation and get in boarding school so I could finish high school at least. But my car only got me as far as Oklahoma. So I ended up living in a community of predominantly Kiowa Indians in the southwestern part of Oklahoma. I started going into peyote meetings, which are these ceremonies that in the late 1890s and you know, our 80s, 90s, when they forced them onto the reservations, and they were not allowed to practice the traditional ceremonies like the Sundance. They were threatened that they would send the soldiers in and massacre the remaining survivors. So they took their spiritual practices underground. And the story is one of the Comanche chiefs, Quanah Parker, had ventured down to the Texas-Mexico border and had procured the peyote from some of the tribes in the area and introduced it to his own Comanche people. And so the Comanches and the Kiowas being very close, and they shared amongst each other. And they developed a ceremony around that. And so I'd be sitting up all night in the teepee with these native elders. And so it was in the peyote meetings that I met my mentor, who was one of the last surviving traditional doctors among the Kiowa tribe. The Native Americans had some of the most powerful healers on the planet, a lot of them possessing paranormal abilities, just extraordinarily gifted. And so my mentor, Horace, once I started apprenticing with him, would transmit portions of his own healing gifts to me. And part of the training it's a practice referred to as the vision quest. Typically, you go out 4 days and nights without food and water. You're not eating or drinking the whole time. And it's by going through the vision quest, you earn the right to work with these gifts of healing but there are times where you feel this presence come to you, descend into your body. And it's through the vision quest that you develop these additional gifts of healing so that you can assist people with a wide range of health-related issues, digestive, respiratory, or neurological disorders, people injured in automobile accidents. So that's how I began.
Okay, so let us get into the questions. Are you ready?
Sure.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay, all right, so let us talk about love's ashes. How can heartbreak guide us to deeper intimacy? You got that?
Yeah. Oftentimes, there's a combination of things. In many instances, the emotional wounding that carries over from our childhood, say if we were subjected to physical, emotional, childhood sexual abuse of some form, or maybe just our basic needs were not met, or our needs for love and acknowledgement. If we had a parent that was emotionally or otherwise unavailable, if one of the parents just kind of abandoned us altogether, left the family. And as children, we're profoundly vulnerable. We have these incredibly deep emotional needs that in many times go unmet. And as a result of either those needs being unmet or abuses that we suffer, it elicits very powerful emotional responses. And when we're not able to process these emotional responses, work through or heal that hurt, which we just don't have the understanding or resources to do so, we internalize that emotional wounding. And so oftentimes what happens is we end up attracting individuals into our lives who reflect that emotional wounding, and our relationships with them become reenactments of those early emotional wounds or traumas that we experience. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, even if we grew up with parents who were very loving, supportive, nurturing, there's the fact that a lot of people out there in the dating pool are themselves quite wounded and have not dealt with their emotional wounding, maybe have no impetus or motivation to address that. Even uh, statistically, what I hear is something like 15% of the population falls into categories, what you refer to as cluster B personality disorders like narcissism and borderline. And so many of us, being incredibly naive, not knowing or understanding, can easily find ourselves getting involved with someone who is very abusive or hurtful, maybe someone that struggles with alcohol dependency or addiction to other recreational drugs. And because of our lack of understanding, when we get involved with these people, we form these romantic attachments. And these people act in ways or say, do things that are hurtful and abusive, and it elicits this powerful emotional responses. We feel hurt, we feel devastated. When we don't process these things, it creates emotional wounding, or either that or it's adding to existing emotional wounds, creating new emotional wounds on top of the old ones. And when we learn to work constructively with our emotions to heal these hurts, these emotional wounds, then by doing so, that opens our heart. It expands our capacity to love and be loved, but it can involve a great deal of work for us. There are different components to it. One is acknowledging what's happened happened or happening. If we're in a relationship or we're attached to someone who is being hurtful or abusive, saying or doing things that are causing a lot of hurt or pain, if we initially acknowledge that, what's taking place and how we feel in response to it, if we could center our awareness in the depth of those feelings wherever they reside, whether it's in our chest cavity or further down in our abdomen or solar plexus, some other part of our body, just fully immerse our awareness in those feelings, breathing very softly and deeply. I say that you're breathing all the way down to your abdomen, you're expanding your rib cage very slowly, and continuing to breathe in the depth of these feelings. You follow them as they go through their progression. And this is a critically important part of helping you to process or digest these emotional responses. Because if you're not able to process the emotions, they end up getting trapped within your body. And so many people, they distract themselves, or they suppress the emotions, or they do whatever to escape the pain of what's happening. Maybe jump into another relationship. They go on some of these dating apps like Tinder and they hook up with somebody. And if you deny or distract yourself or suppress the pain, then it gets trapped in your body, and it's going to come out sooner or later in one way or another. It will, it could express itself as some kind of physical illness eventually if you keep denying or suppressing. Or a lot of times it's going to show up in other relationships. And you also need to make use of therapeutic interventions, because the practice I just described, that's one aspect of the healing, but there's the other aspect of making use of the most effective therapeutic interventions. For some people, it could involve working with a psychotherapist to gain a cognitive understanding of your emotional wounding, your family of origin, some of the dysfunctional dynamics where that all came from. But other interventions that do in deep tissue body work, therapeutic massage, can be very helpful. Acupuncture sometimes can help too. When we form these obsessive romantic attachments to individuals, sometimes our biochemistry is a little crazy, because we have this excessive amount of dopamine and norepinephrine and oxytocin that we feel we have to be with this person, that they're the love of our life, and a lot of it's a projection. And so the acupuncture can help to balance that biochemical process that's going on in our brain. But also, well, my own training from the work I do, where I go out to fast alone in the mountains that 4 days and nights without food and water, the vision quest, as I've done that, that's helped me to let go of those healthy attachments. I don't recommend you do that if you don't have someone to guide you through the process. It's very intense. Too intense, too much for most people, but working with a gifted healer such as myself, I find working with people, what happens is indigenous healers, we work as conduits. We allow this presence to work through us. And so what I find as I work with people individually, it takes those lived experiences, say like you're going through the breakup, you're experiencing this, someone's abandoned you, ghosted you, these patterns of unrequited love, and it's taking this lived experience and all those highly charged emotions, and it's literally taking that and transforming, transmuting it. It's being digested and all the emotions associated with it. And as that happens, you're able to dissolve and let go of those unhealthy attachments, and you come out the other side feeling lighter, and you evolve into healthier relationships.
Beautiful. Oh my God, Ben. You have literally answered all of my questions.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, all right. So, in conclusion, let's say there is a piece of advice you'd like to give to the audience. What would that be? And let's say there are some ones listening now who would like to reach out to you, learn more about what you do. How can that be possible?
I think what's important is to embrace her life experiences, because in my mid-20s, I had a lot of the trauma of my childhood and adolescence resurfacing, and it was playing out in my attempts to form intimate relationships. And as that was happening, it was excruciatingly painful. The pain that we experience in response to a breakup or divorce, or if we're struggling with patterns of abandonment, unrequited love, is some of the most excruciating pain that many of us will ever experience. Also, the death of a loved one. And when these kinds of emotions surface, when we're having these experiences, many of us are so incredibly resistant to what's happening. We fight it, we resist it, we, as I said before, we try to distract ourselves, we numb ourselves to the pain. Maybe we self-medicate with alcohol and other recreational drugs. Our food, we eat too much, or eat foods such as consume things like refined sugar. And all these things numb us to our emotions. We smoke cigarettes or weed, or we spend too much time on social media, uh, go shopping, all kinds of things to fill the empty void. But in so many ways, we resist our authentic emotional responses to our lived experiences, and we resist those experiences themselves. And as we do so, there's this disconnect that happens. But I've learned over the years, to the best of our ability, we need to embrace these experiences, along with our subsequent cognitive and emotional responses. So we're going through a breakup or divorce, we're going through some other hardship, some other profound difficulty in our life, and when we can embrace it, it doesn't mean we like it or enjoy it in any way. We certainly don't love it, but this is what's happening. And when we can embrace it and say, okay, so this is what's happening. This is my life lesson that I have to learn at this time. What do I need to do now in order to, how can I use this as a means to heal, to grow, and to evolve? And so I would take whatever experiences, and there's all kinds of things, like the struggles that I had in relationships before. If a relationship wasn't working out, if I was ghosted, or if I had an attachment to someone who wasn't reciprocating my desire, or there are times when I encountered difficult periods in my work, in my business. Working with people is 2008, 9, our economy crashed. And at the same time, all these changes that were taking place, all of a sudden, smartphones are becoming available and social media, and people were becoming more and more distracted. And as that was changing the biochemical makeup of people's brains, just firing off this dopamine response, the eliciting the brain's dopamine reward cycle. And so instead of it's basically it discourages those deeper reflective introspective processes, so people tend to skitter along the surface of reality. And so because of that, people's attention span became much shorter. And I had to find other ways to reach a lot more people because they weren't able to do the deep internal processing. So all these challenges that we face of one form or another in our lives, they could elicit emotional responses that are sometimes painful, or we feel stressed out, we feel overwhelmed. And when we can take whatever's happening in our life that's stressing us out or causing us to feel grief or upset or anger or frustration, when we can work with these emotional responses, that practice I was describing before, you acknowledge what's happening, what you feel in response to it, drop into the depth of those feelings, breathing softly and deeply. And this is not something that you're just going to do for a few minutes. Sometimes you experience a profound loss, like you go through a breakup where it's someone that you love deeply or felt very strongly for, or go through a divorce, if you have these long-standing patterns of abandonment, if you've there's so many changes happening in the world, and there are businesses that people start and they're thriving for periods of time, but as things change, sometimes the bottom can fall out from under you, and so that once thriving business, all of a sudden it's like you're struggling and you don't know how you're going to survive. And when that occurs, again, acknowledging what's happening, what you're feeling in response to it, go into the depth of those feelings, breathing softly and deeply. And it helps you as you process, as you work through these emotions, you keep breathing into the depths of the feelings, and they'll go through a progression. Maybe it starts as anger or frustration or fear, it can progress to sadness. But you continue to stay with those feelings and breathe into them. And as it goes through that progression, what I find is that we often gain insight. We gain valuable insights into, okay, here's something you can try. Here's a possible solutions that you could implement. And there's also the letting go of what's not working, or coming to terms with being able to be in a place of acceptance for what is, what has changed. And so it makes you more flexible. It gives you a greater capacity to adapt to the ever-changing realities of life in this modern day world. And so having that, it facilitates this renewal, where you're able to, instead of getting stuck or trapped in this limited range of response or reaction, you're able to be more present to what is taking place in your life, to the realities, to the situations that you're encountering, to adapt to them, to respond in healthier ways, respond with what's needed, respond more appropriately to the challenges you're facing. And as I said, when you make use of these therapeutic interventions, for me, it's going through the Vision Quest primarily. I mean, I will do deep tissue body work at times because we go through all the stress, and there's a lot of the stress, a lot of this emotion gets trapped in our bodies, and it's difficult. Our bodies carry that stress, and we feel weighed down. We feel depleted, exhausted, burned out, all these things. So say we do body work. There are times where I've done fasting. I've gone over 2 weeks not eating, just drinking water and maybe taking some mineral supplements, so I didn't get too depleted. But going through the fasting, that would help my body to release a lot of the stressful emotion that was trapped within. That's just fasting with just water and taking some mineral supplements. And then again, when I would do the Vision Quest, that would oftentimes we lack a lot of the crucial resources we need to address the challenges that we're facing. So for me, going through the Vision Quest, and for those in the listening audience, when you can work with a gifted healer such as myself, then what happens is it helps to transform a lot of the suffering that we internalize from, say, past traumas or some of these very difficult, stressful life experiences that we encounter. We digest those experiences, our emotional responses, and we develop these greater resources so that we can show up more present. And we just, with the additional resources, we have more of what we need to address these challenges or situations. We become more highly functional. So, does that make sense, what I was describing?
Yeah, it does. Beautiful, man. I must
Yeah.
acknowledge the fact that you took your explanations from the root. You went down to the root, not just scraping the surface, but deep down to the root, and that's so good. It's actually going to help the audience. I'm so glad about that. So, how can they reach you? Let's say they want to reach you or learn more about what you do. How can that be possible?
The best way to reach me is go to my website, which is benoofana.com. I'll spell that out. It's BENOOFANA.com. So again, benoofana.com. And if you go to the section that says contact, there's a contact form that you could send me a message there. There's also my Google Voice number. So you could find my Google Voice number on my website, benoofana.com. If somebody's going through a breakup or divorce or struggling with heartache, there is a free ebook. You can go to gettingoveryourbreakup.com. Let me confirm that real quick. Yourbreakup.com. And if you can download that ebook, and you can gain a lot of insight into what it takes to heal the heartache. But yeah, the best thing, go to my website, because there's all my contact info. You could find me on Facebook, or I have a YouTube channel. You just look me up on YouTube. Some of what I post there can be a bit political at times, because I was spending a lot of time in Sri Lanka during its war, and just having friends who their close family members and their friends were killed in the war. And so, and there's a lot of conflict in the world at this point. And we as human beings, much of humanity doesn't seem to evolve in that way. We continue to reenact these conflicts, unfortunately. So I assume that will continue. But so if you see some of that on my social media, you understand I have a lot of concern for that. Also animal rescue. It's yeah. But any other questions you have?
No, that's gonna be the end of the show, Ben. Thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for honoring the invite, Ben. It means a whole lot. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing me on, Elisha. Okay.
Thank you for tuning in to this incredible episode. Your support means the world to us, and we truly value you. We look forward to having you join us for the next episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback is greatly appreciated.